Bernard was a moth. At least, if moths had names like people, he would be called Bernard. In other stories, moths with human names possibly wear little waistcoats and drink tea from china cups, but Bernard was just a real moth in the real world. Bernard was a peppered moth, and, in case you don't know this, peppered moths have a very clever trick. They lie flat against the bark of certain trees, and, if they stay perfectly still, can hardly be seen at all. But that isn't Bernard. This is Bernard. Bernard wasn't quite the same as his friends. And of course by friends we don't really mean that, because unlike humans, moths don't really have friends. So really we're saying that Bernard was a bit different from the other moths on the trunk of the same tree in the woods, a little way outside of town. Bernard's wings were considerably darker than the wings of the other peppered moths on the tree. It's just the way he was, and he didn't even know it. Perhaps if moths were like humans, the other moths might have pointed and laughed at Bernard for being different from them. And perhaps this might have made Bernard feel unhappy that he was just the way he was. But because they were just moths, none of them said anything at all. They all just stayed there, flat against the bark, minding their own business, very well hidden from hungry birds. Bernard was not so well hidden. In fact, even if he stayed very still, he stood out like a sore thumb. Which is something that humans say, because moths don't have thumbs to get sore. The truth is, Bernard stood out like a dark-coloured moth against the speckled grey bark of a tree, which is exactly what he was. Soon a bird saw him. In this story, birds aren't like human people either. They're just real birds in the real world, and that's a fine enough thing to be. But if you were a moth, you might disagree. This bird was hungry, and when they are hungry, and if they can catch them, birds eat moths. The bird easily saw Bernard and caught him, and was about to eat him. But, because nothing is ever completely perfect, the bird didn't quite manage to keep hold of him. Not perfect for a hungry bird, but for Bernard it was just about okay, this time. Bernard flew away from the bird, in the direction of town. Now, in some stories about animals with names and clothes and cups of tea, a trip to town might be all about adventure and seeking fame and fortune. But this is a story about ordinary moths. Bernard flew towards town because he was escaping from a bird, and because with night falling there were bright lights coming on in the town. You see, moths are sometimes attracted to light. Bernard spent nearly the whole night fluttering around one of the street lamps in the town. But as the early morning light started to rise, the lamp was turned off, and Bernard flew away, toward a clump of dirty trees in a dirty park in the dirty town. The town and the park and the trees were dirty because the humans in the town had been busy since before Bernard was even born, busy making machines and tools and furniture and china cups and storybooks about little animals that wear waistcoats and drink tea and all the other things that humans seem to need. Things that moths can live without. The humans burned a lot of coal and wood to power their machines and to heat up their homes. All the soot and smoke from the humans' fires and machines and factories had to go somewhere. In fact, it went everywhere, but one of those somewheres was the branches and trunks of the trees in the little park where Bernard was now flying. The tree bark was very dirty and sooty. By chance alone, the sooty, dirty colour of the tree bark happened to be quite the same colour as Bernard. The birds in the dirty, sooty town were no less hungry than the birds back in the woods, but because Bernard was the same colour as the sooty, dirty bark, and because he stayed very still, the birds couldn't see him. Instead, the birds could see the ordinary peppered moths that were speckled greyish in colour. Perhaps some of these were the very same moths that were alongside Bernard on the clean trees out in the woods. Bernard was safer here on the dirty, sooty tree than he'd ever been in his whole life. It would be nice to say that Bernard lived happily ever after, but this is a story about real moths, and real moths only live for quite a short time by our reckoning. So, Bernard lived his short moth life, and died, and he was gone. This might seem sad to us, but for a moth, Bernard lived a full life, and he never expected anything more. And in a way, a little bit of Bernard wasn't gone. It carried on, because you see, Bernard's offspring, we can't call them children, because if there is something that's the children of moths, those are called caterpillars. No, these were grown-up moths, just like Bernard had been. But the next year, Bernard's offspring had dark, sooty-coloured wings, just like Bernard. Because of this, and because the humans didn't seem to be likely to stop burning things any time soon, Bernard's descendants, as long as they stayed very still on the bark of the dirty, sooty trees near the sooty, dirty town, escaped the hungry birds and survived to have more dark, sooty-coloured offspring of their own. Lots and lots of them.